Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Alibaba, for the introduction. We thought we should have a chat with an industry leader that has grown his business across the continent, learn from his experiences, and find out how African exchanges can help to catalyze the growth of entrepreneurs across the continent. When Ms. Aruma Ote was making her speech, she did challenge African exchanges to go for at least 44,000 companies. That is a major challenge because today, Asea, which represents the African securities exchanges, has about 28 exchanges that are representing 32 countries from across the continent. That is 1,100 listed companies, $1.5 trillion in market capitalization. So to grow from 1,100 to 44,000, it's a major task. And it is one that I'm sure my colleagues here from various parts of the continent would take seriously. And as the outgoing president of Asea, I will be challenging the incoming president and the new executive committee to really take that challenge seriously and work on seeing how we can bridge that gap between 1,100 and 44,000. With that said, we wanted to get the experience of an industry leader, and Ike, we're very pleased to welcome you to join us. You've done a lot of interesting things. I'm not sure that Alibaba's introduction does justice to some of the things you've done. So perhaps if you can just take a moment to reflect on your journey so far, building an African institution, and not only that, also going further to introduce philanthropy into it and taking that philanthropy across the continent to set the stage for the conversation.
Okay. Thank you, Oscar. And congratulations on your 2 years, is it?
4 years.
4 years. You did an excellent job. You know, as I sit in this hall, we're talking about exchanges, we're talking about capital markets, and at the end of the day, really, it's all about entrepreneurs and companies pursuing wealth creation, as Aruma very aptly put it. And that process of wealth creation being enabled by markets and exchanges like the one you run so ably. And you see, my story is a living example of how exchanges can work and can be used to catalyze growth and wealth creation in Africa. And so Alibaba was talking about the fact that he met me, and then shortly after that, what do you say I did? I bought a bank and named it Access Bank or something. Now, Access Bank was a listed company on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Okay. It was a very small bank and it wasn't doing well, to be honest. It tried to raise capital, and the markets were not, responding very positively to its attempt to raise capital. And that was the opportunity for myself and Herbert Wigwe, who I had convinced crazily that we should leave GTB and go and buy our own bank, to do something. And it took $10 million, essentially, to buy 51% of Access Bank. Between Herbert and I, we had $2 million. We understood the markets very well. And so we were able to form a group, an investing group, and basically raised, and then we bought Access Bank. So understand that without the Nigerian Stock Exchange, without Access Bank being listed, this story that we are going to chat about would never have happened, to be honest. or at least it would have been much more difficult to happen. And so think of me as just an entrepreneur or a young man. I was certainly under 35 at the time, well under 35, who had some small change, okay, and who had dreams. And this is what exchanges are there for. You know, people who have dreams, you know, you bring your idea and share it with those who have access to capital, and it's formed around your dream, and then it's unleashed, okay? So in 2002, we got into Access Bank. The first thing I learned was that the dollar balance sheet of Access Bank was a bit smaller than Aliko Dangote's credit card limit. And you know, I thought to myself, after GTB, I mean, what have I let myself in for, you know? But then, you know, the funny thing is that talent, which is when you talk about building an African powerhouse or a regional champion, it's all about talent. Fortunately, financial services talent is not something that Africa lacks. And so, you know, putting a very strong team together was the first thing that we did. A customer value proposition that was all about doing good in terms of meeting needs, but doing them in a way that society really benefited was our resounding, you know, value proposition. So we said to the market then that Access Bank, which was ranked, I think maybe number 80 out of 90 banks, we came to the stock exchange, Oscar, and you know, at an event where all the brokers and the investors were, and we said in 5 years' time, this Access Bank you see today will be in the top 10 banks in Nigeria. The great thing about it was that the market didn't laugh, the investors didn't laugh. They looked at these obviously highly driven young men and women and said, let's give them a chance, okay? And then we started building this thing, organic and inorganic growth. And part of our growth trajectory was going to be to, you know, really solidify ourselves in Nigeria and use Nigeria as a platform to unleash our value proposition across Africa and the world, okay? Fortunately, 5 years later, we were number 8. Okay?
From 80.
Yeah.
Number 80 to number 8.
Yeah. And then we then said, we called the market again, and we said, in 5 years' time, we are going to be top 5. You know, moving from 80 to 8 was a bit easier than moving from 8 to top 5, because the guys around, or let me just say the institutions around, were very formidable. And that in itself also concretized the need for us to go regional. Our first port of call was Gambia, next was Rwanda, Congo, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Zambia, the UK, so it's not just Africa. Since I left, I know that Herbert is done Shanghai, Dubai, you know. So this is so if you think about that thing in 2002,
you've gone way beyond that.
I think we've gone way beyond that.
And you're not just now an African champion. You're now trying to be a global player.
Certainly,
right.
certainly. I like this. I like the sound of that. You know, one abiding thing I loved in Aruma's speech is this notion of, at a time, Africa, you know, certainly Africans could prove themselves as equal, if not better, on the global stage across different fields of endeavor. I didn't go to school, well, maybe finish after my first degree. I went to school in Nigeria. I went to primary school in Nigeria, secondary school in Nigeria, university in Nigeria, law school in Nigeria, okay? Later on, yes, you know, postgraduate training outside Nigeria. But to be honest, I have worked with Africans across many fields of endeavor. And I find that if the African is given the platform, they can be world beaters. And certainly, if you look at banking, if you look at what Aliko is doing in cement, okay, insofar as the African entrepreneur has access to capital, they can build companies that are world-class. I'm clear about that. The key challenge, however, is that capital formation in Africa is still very, very weak. And so you have to be extremely strong to break through. Extremely strong, and that's not what it's about, okay? And when I speak about capital formation, I'm not just talking about markets and exchanges and operators. I'm also talking about the government framework, the public sector support that is required for capital formation. It's still too difficult to scale, all right? And we have to make it easy to scale. I'll give you an example. I mentioned that Rwanda was one of the countries that we set up shop. So I went to Rwanda to speak about health and about mobilizing private sector support and philanthropy in health. That's what I went for. And I met this president, Paul Kagame, in that process. And we were just talking like this, and he said, you're a banker, aren't you? And I said, yes. And he said, I hear you have plans to move outside of Nigeria. I said, yes. And he says, East Africa, what's your plan? I said, my plan is Kenya first. And he said, no, it's going to be Rwanda first. And I said, why? And he said, okay, let's finish this talk, all right, and go to my office. I'm not kidding you. This is the president, right? Okay, meeting me for the first time. So we go, and an hour later, I'm with the central bank governor, minister for finance, all right, and with owners of banks, okay? Literally, before I leave Rwanda that day, right, we've agreed to do a deal in Rwanda, all right? Now, that's the type of support that gets things done. Now, a year later, I go and visit where Access Bank is in Rwanda, doing very well and so on. So I go and visit Rwanda, and I needed a visa, you know. So I'm talking to an audience of Rwandese businessmen and so on, and Kagame is in the room. And I say, look, Mr. President, it's more difficult for me to get a visa to Rwanda than it is for me to get a visa to the UK or to the US. I have multiple visas anywhere and so on. Make life easy for us. So I go back to the airport. I'm flying. And when I get to the airport, I notice that I'm being delayed. And I say, come, did I offend Mr. Kagame that much? You know, I mean, is there a problem? And I'm delayed for like 5 minutes. And then this official comes, big man comes, you know, to the airport, you know, and I can see a flurry of activities. And he asks for my passport, which they were holding. So he takes my passport to one side and then does something with my passport, brings it back and gives it to me. So I'm with the CEO of Access Bank Rwanda. And he says, let me see what happened to your passport. And he looks at it and he's looking at it. And I say, what's that? And he says, they've just given you a visa for life.
You know, the CEO of the Rwandan Stock Exchange is here. I'm sure he must be very proud. Stand up so that we can recognize you. So the point is institutional support from the highest levels, policymakers, getting things done and making it easy for entrepreneurs to actually do business.
Now, if we just flip to that notion of every government in Africa thinking like Rwanda is thinking and acting like Rwanda is acting, then this 45,000 companies is doable. Okay? So that's the issue as to whether or not there can be massive transformation in Africa that's going to unleash wealth at a level that has not been seen, maybe since what happened in China. It can happen. It can happen. Okay? And I guess, the greatest incentive is profit. If we think of the amount of money that will be made and the wealth and the savings and the lifting out of from poverty that can take place, I think it's well worth it. It's well worth it pursuing that dream.
So I know everybody here is wondering, where is Access Bank today? I know you got to number 8. And where is Access Bank today?
Well, depending on what you look, could be 3, at worst 4.
So you broke the...
Yeah. We keep our promises.
So you're now within the top 5 in the country. Yeah. Very impressive. Now, I know that you've done, since you left Access Bank, since you left the exchange as the president of the exchange, you've done a number of things: Coronation, the Africa Initiative for Governance. Can you just touch upon those and how you're using those to make sustainable change on the continent?
If you want to make money in Africa, all right, if you think simply about, the hierarchy of needs, Maslow, okay, and you have at the bottom basic needs, and then you have safety and security, and then the next you have the need to interact and be happy and entertain yourself, and then after that, more aspirational things around recognition, etc. Okay. If you look at the African opportunity is all about, today really, is all about meeting basic needs, because basic needs are largely unmet, okay, and providing solutions to those basic needs at scale, all right? So think about Aliko and cement, which is a housing thing. You need to house yourself, all right? And you produce enough cement for 1.2 billion people, you're going to become very wealthy if you can do it at scale. Okay, fine. Now, my notion as far as financial services is concerned in Africa is that we've played a lot on the short end, okay, of financial solutions. So money transfer, credit cards, things like that, okay? Just the notion of a bank account. But the need around safety and security and wealth creation is completely unmet in Africa today, apart from South Africa. Completely unmet, okay? And so, yes, we are beginning to grow pensions, we are beginning to grow an asset management field and so on. But honestly speaking, we're on the ground floor, okay? And if you think of the notion of retail banking in Africa being on the middle floor, but we're on the ground floor. And so, kind of when I left Access Bank, I said, I'm going to keep my investments in short money because, those investments are, first of all, quite significant, but more importantly, they pay me great dividends. But focus my mind on the long money game, all right? And so Coronation Capital essentially was or is a PE platform, all right, that has grown into a much larger, diversified investment management platform, which we want to, just as we did with Access Bank, all right, establish very firmly in Nigeria and then go regional, okay? I'm kind of giving you a sneak preview into a major announcement you're going to hear in January. But I think that a lot of money is going to be made in that space.
And if I may interject, just as you did with Access Bank using the stock exchange, you're going to use the stock exchange with Coronation as well, right?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, even in a more direct way, in the sense that the stock exchange for the Coronation investment platform is a tool, is a solution that we are going to be providing to the market. In the case of Access Bank, it was an enabler, you understand my point. So there's a lot going to happen. I was just whispering to the president of the exchange, Mr. Ogunbanjo, that my being president of the exchange, as you know, has kind of held me down because I couldn't do things that would put me in conflict with my role, It's also good that as I disengage, I'm able to unleash my creativity in the capital markets for wealth creation. But then you asked about philanthropy. The one thing that I've found, across 54 African countries. Now, this is, we're mainly Africans here, so I don't need to argue this thing about, well, Africa is not a country. I mean, we know that, all right? But I don't think we truly appreciate what it means to roll out a business across several African nations. So whether the country is small or the country is big, the country will have a president. The country will have a maybe central bank governor and other regulators and so on, who must be given their sovereign respect, okay? And so you really need a lot of energy and you need a lot of relational skills when you say you want to roll out. So when you receive a phone call that this president wants to see you now, you need to get on a plane and make sure, you see him. And when you need an approval or there's a policy context that can make or mar your dream, you need to interact with the government. What I found was that it was too often the exception that the public servant in Africa was an enabler of things happening. I found that in Africa, too often, I found that policy makers and policy implementers were disablers of dreams. And I said, why? Why should that be the case? Why should I almost have to die to make my business work? Why should I, as a barber in Obalende, which is not too far from here, have to, in addition to learning how to cut hair, why do I have to learn how to be a power generator to run a barbing shop? Okay? So I kind of did a study, and I found that over several years, from about the mid-70s, Africa suffered a massive underinvestment in capacity in the public sector, whilst there was a shift of massive investment into the private sector. Okay, so I am a product. This local guy who merits sitting, here. I'm a product of investments in the private sector. Okay, now imagine that instead of going to the private sector, I went to the public sector, as our parents did, most of them. Okay, I would forget the amount of talent you might assume I have. I would just be that. You know what I'm talking about. So my notion is this, that we cannot afford to live in Africa with this underinvestment in capacity in the public sector, because we will all suffer for it. And so Africa Initiative for Governance is all about building capacity in the public sector. So the first thing we started was scholarships to Oxford University's Blavatnik School of Government to study an MPP on the condition that you must come back and work for your home country. Okay. Fellowships for public servants who have excelled. Go do your 1-year fellowship, re-energize yourself, think through a problem you're going to solve again, and come back and do it. So Professor Jiga, who was the Electoral Commission chairman, Georgina Woods, past CJ in Ghana, these have been fellows. And then what I'm working on now is a university, a world-class finishing school, as good as GFK, as good as Blavatnik, as good as Lee Kuan Yew School, in Africa, all right, for Africans, for public servants only, all right? And then we go on and on. I'm also working with the civil service right now around reform, hopefully to make the civil service in Nigeria, work better. So that's what I'm doing.
So you've identified challenges at the public sector. You're taking active steps to contribute to the solutions for these challenges. In the private sector, having chaired the board of an exchange, what challenges and advice would you give the exchanges that are here in also breaching the gap, that financing gap that would allow us to actually provide value for 44,000 companies and get them listed on our exchanges?
Thanks, Oscar. I can't remember where I was recently. Interestingly, and I think I have to thank Aruma for that, I've chaired 2 exchanges actually. Okay. The FMDQ and the Nigerian Stock Exchange. I think I'm one of the few Africans or people in the world that can.
That's true.
Stronger round of applause, I think. But the first thing is this. Clearly, an exchange in Africa will have to walk the same path as exchanges across the world to make themselves fit for purpose. So if you are mutual, you've got to demutualize. Okay? If you have the constraints of a mutual structure around you, you are going to really be hamstrung, to provide that value that you're asking for. Management has to be independent. Management has to be entrepreneurial. Management has to be completely incentivized to do great things. And that can only happen in a demutualized context. The next thing, of course, is that for African exchanges, I think life is a bit easier as they come of age, because what technology can do today, all right, and was not there when exchanges in the advanced markets, were being built, is just tremendous. Okay, and I like to see. I think that with the very many options around, from blockchain, distributed ledger technologies, and things like that, to even just simply digital systems for distributing financial products, okay? Your ability to leapfrog and serve retail markets, okay, is tremendous. And honestly speaking, I will hold Asea accountable if in 10 years' time, Asea cannot boast, all right, of having reached 100 million Africans as users of exchange products and services. If you haven't done that, then you haven't realized your full potential. There is something happening in the world right now around technology that has given you the power to democratize capital markets.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to get the audience involved in the conversation. So if you would like to ask a question of Mr. Aigbeje Aikimokede, please just indicate, introduce yourself, and ask the question. While you're thinking about the questions to ask, I have one here already, and it is, what is the role of human capital development in the growth of the investment and sustainable growth of Africa?
The World Bank recently published the Median Human Capital Index. And the Human Capital Index works like this. It's an index that measures countries on a scale of 0 to 1, okay? And the notion here is that if you look at a country, you can assess the degree to which that country, through investments in health, education, and other things, right, have provided its talent at 18 the ability to rise to their full potential. Okay? I think Singapore is ranked number 1, all right? And so Singapore's score is 0.9. In other words, the typical or average Singaporean will rise to 90% of their potential, so to speak, all right? Now, Nigeria's score is 0.32. And that, or something like that, 0.32. I didn't expect this question, so but the notion, therefore, is that the typical Nigerian, okay, will rise to 30% of their potential. All right? And so, why is human capital important? The issue is not that in Africa or in Nigeria we don't have a latent talented pool of human capital. We are not investing sufficiently in that human capital. And nations have found that, I recently gave a speech. I said it's a third world to first world has done it simply by investing in its human capital. If you invest in your human capital, every other thing will follow. So think about this notion, right? So you have 2 kids, twins, all right? Indulge me here. It's just, you have twins, all right? Born to a West African couple. And an average West African couple, which means they are poor, all right? And which means they are earning $2 a day, all right? For some reason, the mother takes one twin and decides to hazard the migration to Europe, all right? Leaving the father with the other twin back in West Africa, say in Lagos, okay? Indulge me with this, okay? And they go to Norway, right? The twin in Norway, and let's assume they are granted asylum, the twin in Norway is going to end up living to 80, right? And is going to be guaranteed 18 years of education. The kid in Nigeria is going to live till 60 and is going to get 5 years of education. Now let's even make it a bit more dramatic. These twins have the same IQ or a greater IQ than Steve Jobs, and the same potential or greater potential than Steve Jobs. Okay? And so that twin in Norway, this African in Norway, is going to change the world. That twin in Nigeria, you get the story.
Yeah.
And I guess that answers the question.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ike. I understand the vice president is here, so I would need to go and get him.
All right.
But thank you very much for your insights. Thank you very much for giving us food for thought and challenging us to rise to the occasion as capital markets in Africa and bridge the financing gap that entrepreneurs need to scale, not only in country but across borders. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oscar.